Oh, here she is.
Hello. Okay.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Am I set up okay? Because I'm found the quietest space in the house to, to do this.
Perfect. If we are quiet or anything doesn't work, please just say and we'll be louder or we'll come nearer, whatever you need. But thank you so much for joining us for this East Meets West in Conversation with series. So I'm with Maryam Wahid, who I'm very excited to be speaking with. Just a really brief bit of context. There's been a number of these talks now, so I won't go too much into detail. But East Meets West is a masterclass series organised by Derby Quad, where I work as the assistant curator, Format International Photography Festival, and Grain Projects, which is based in Birmingham, and Format and Quad are in Derby. And we are generously supported by Arts Council England. The masterclass aims to give emerging photographers a chance to get some industry advice from professionals, and this is over a 6-month period, and for this edition it's all gone digital with a series of in conversation with and it was with all the 15 participants from this course. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Maryam, who is one of those participants, and I'll just give a brief bio and before we start talking about her work. So Maryam Wahid uses photography. Wahid's work explores her identity as a British Pakistani Muslim woman. She expresses the origins of the Pakistani community in her hometown Birmingham by exploring her deeply rooted family history and the mass integration of migrants from the United Kingdom. Her work explores the female identity, the history of the South Asian community in Britain, and the notion of home and belonging. She graduated with a BA in photography in 2018, won the Portrait of Britain by the British Journal of Photography, and most recently won the Format Reviewers Awards 2020, which was very recent indeed. It's about 2 weeks ago. So thank you for being here, Maryam, and giving us your time. Do you want to start by maybe letting us know about your entry into photography, and then we'll start talking about some of your projects?
Thank you so much for that lovely intro, Laura, and it's a pleasure to be doing this with you firstly, because I've known you for 2 years, my photography kind of journey, and it's just been a pleasure that you supporting me, and always seeing you in events and places. So it's nice that we're having this discussion together. So yeah, my entry into photography, I guess I've always been really interested and fascinated in taking photographs. From a very young age, kind of taking my dad's digital camera and destroying so many of them, him just buying new Sony, cameras, and then I think I was born in 1995, so I had a glimpse of film cameras, but then it was just a series of digital cameras in my family, and I used to just love taking that and just using that to photograph my life in weird ways. My siblings can probably relate to that in ways, and funnily enough, the self-portrait was always kind of there as well, taking the camera and then taking pictures of myself in the mirror or something, just to document that. Even though I must have been 8 or 9 years old, it was just a way of kind of documenting my life, and I thought, this is great. Photography is just a great thing. Like, it literally is such an immediate response to documenting something, and to capturing something. So it's always been in the back, and when I kind of started, choosing my levels of subjects in A levels and GCSEs, and then later at university, I was always kind of fascinated by art, and I was very lucky that actually photography was a subject that I could learn in school and college, and then taking it on to university. I think sometimes in the past there hasn't been photography as a subject in the GCSE or in A levels, but I was very fortunate, and I'm very fortunate to have educators that saw that I was good at photography and that I should pursue it. So yeah, I eventually studied it at university, and it wasn't until my final year when I actually realized that you can use photography to document identity and document the things that I'm interested in, which is my everyday life, and just the the things that connect us as humans, which is the place we come from, places we come from, and just things like that. So I guess that's where it all stemmed, basically.
Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. And what are 2 years you've had since you graduated in 2018?
Absolutely.
And maybe we can talk about some of those projects from that time. So if you wouldn't mind talking, we're going to talk about three to four projects today. And if you wouldn't mind just kind of talking us through those, starting kind of from your first projects.
Yeah, so like I said, it wasn't until my final year when I started to photograph things that I was extremely passionate and interested about. So I decided to start with my family album. I've always been fascinated at looking at old family pictures, looking at, you know, VCR films of like my family and what's I think I like the fact that you can almost dip into a time that either you were part of or that was before you even came. So for me, I think the photographs, they made me almost go back in time to when my parents got married, to when, you know, my siblings were born, to just knowing their kind of story of migrating to Britain. So both my parents were born in Pakistan, and my mother migrated when she was about 18 years old, and my father migrated when he was about 6 years old to the UK. So they both have got drastically different personalities. My dad is very, I would say, British, so he's very like integrated, and he's brought up in the UK, specifically Birmingham, where I'm from. And my mom, she's been brought up and raised in Pakistan, in Lahore. So it's been very interesting to see their identities and how their kind of upbringing and the places that they've grown up in has shaped them. And ultimately, where I've grown up, it's shaped me. You know, I'm constantly consuming the local community that I'm around in Birmingham, and you know, I've got friends, and I'm a huge extrovert, as you know, Laura. So I've got enough friends and people around me to understand how our society is shaped in Britain, and specifically, I mean, the British Pakistani society. So this is where I was kind of interested in, and that's what I found in photographs brought me. So I specifically decided to explore the female identity in the Pakistani community through photographs, and I'm still on that journey. So I think specifically from university, it's been a learning process, and I don't think you ever stop learning as a photographer. And I think that you always have certain things that you're interested in that motivate you to learn more, discover more, and I guess shape your practice in a way. It shapes your practice in a way. So yeah, I decided to photograph women from the Pakistani diaspora, which was a reflection of my mother's identity. You know, I'm very close to my mom, so and I've always had conversations with her. I've got to know her life in Britain, and her integrating in Britain, and her migration story, and that was all kind of a result of that project. So I photographed myself in my mother's clothing that she'd brought over from Pakistan 35 years ago. And I went to all those locations that resonated with her when she migrated. So some of them were parks that she'd visit with my dad. Some of them are actually domestic spaces, because the community, when they first settled here, especially my dad's family anyway, they often spend the most of the time in the home. And, you know, there's a lot of photographs of my mom in the album where she is just chilling in the bedroom, because that was the private space. You know, when you live in joint families in Asian, back in the days, it doesn't happen much now, they often lived in, you know, with multiple families in the home. So that was a time for them to kind of just hang out, and the pictures kind of reflect that as well. So I wanted to bring in the domestic side of stuff, but also that kind of excitement of actually getting dressed up and going somewhere. But also the journey of like women who migrate from another country and who have had to settle in this country, and you know, raise children who are British, and you know, then have this kind of transformation in mentality, basically. So that makes sense, but yeah. So yeah, so that's literally where I've been inspired from, and then my projects ever since have been all shaped by my family album, or my curiosity simply to, you know, what does it exactly mean to be a Pakistani woman? What does it mean to have these two kind of cultures that are part of you? And yeah, so I've had that kind of explored through all my projects ever since I've graduated.
So maybe talk, for those who haven't seen your work, your works are kind of in the home, and you also use archives in your work as well. Could you just maybe kind of visually describe your approach to the photograph and what you're trying to achieve in your work? Just so that people obviously should look back at Maryam's work, but just to kind of give a bit of a visual kind of style.
Yeah, I know. I love talking about the thought process. So I think for me, photography is very special, and actually archived imagery is so special. The fact that, you know, a stranger from like another era or generation has taken this portrait of my parents on their wedding day outside Birmingham registry office, and for me to instantly connect with that image as a photographer as well, but also as a product of my parents, you know, it is something very special to me. And I think photographs in general, they do that to us. We almost carry them around as special objects, you know. We have such value for these things, you know. We can actually resonate with something in those images, even though they might not have been in the time we're born. For me anyway, it was that. For me, it wasn't in the time I was born. I ultimately clicked with some of these photographs, and actually my mother growing up in Pakistan and seeing predominantly half our family album of Lahore, which is where my mum grew up, is very interesting, because I almost got to know my mum's like homeland. I got to know my homeland through those photographs. And I started to question, you know, what's this, what's that happening? Or, you know, and obviously it's a different place to Britain. It's nothing like Britain, Pakistani. So I got to know, I got a sense of that all through photographs. And I think that's something that's very special, that kind of connection. And, you know, we almost carry these images around as human beings, of our loved ones, to connect with them. And I think for me, whenever it comes to my projects, I try and reflect that kind of nostalgia, but also that feeling that I have almost kind of met people that I've lost through photographs. So like, I'll give you examples. So my most recent project, which is unreleased, it's called Zeb Nissa, and it's supported by the Midlands Arts Centre. And that project, I went to Pakistan for the first time, and I documented my mother's home where she grew up. And I had only seen this house in photographs. I'd never, you know, been to Pakistan before, so I'd only seen this in pictures. And both my grandparents died in Pakistan, and I didn't get to meet them either. So it was literally through photographs that I got to see my grandparents, but also I actually went to that place because of photographs. Like photography took me there to get to know them. And also then when photographing that kind of home and that space, and photographing or meeting those people around in that home. Now my mum's kind of extended family now live there. So that's basically what photography brought to me. You know, it brings you that connection to people that you've lost in a way, because you use photographs of your loved ones, and you explore, you get to know them, you get to know what they're wearing, you get to know how they smile, how they look, what you may even sense a certain body language from the images, but ultimately you get to learn a lot. And I think there's something really powerful in that.
Yeah, well, that's phrased very beautifully, and I think it's very, the way you describe the way of kind of almost meeting someone again within your work is very, that really makes sense in looking at your portraits or your work in general. And we're kind of dotting back and forth. Thank you for talking about your recent work. So actually, maybe we should continue talking about that. So, you know, once you arrived in Pakistan and you were meeting people, tell us about kind of what happened when you got there, and how you created this new body of work, which you plan to show later.
So I initially got out there last year. It was around this time, actually. It was April time, actually. I went there for the first time, and I was working on a research and development project. So I actually created a series called Ek Aurat Ka Safar, and that was basically researching on what it means to be a woman in Pakistan today. Again, it was kind of a result of my curiosity to understanding the kind of cultural aspect of being a Pakistani woman, but then also having a British identity, but then having stuff ingrained in our culture. Like, I wanted to dig more deeply into what that meant and what these things meant to women today in Pakistan. because we stuck onto them as people who have migrated away, and as a diaspora kind of communities of who moved to another place, we still have held on to certain cultural things. So I also was obviously there. I also had a personal experience, as in it was because of my first time there. Even though I was doing the recent development, I wanted to develop something quite personal as a response to my understanding of Pakistan. So what had happened was I got out there 10 days before that kind of official visit, and I started photographing my mother's home where she grew up. I started photographing where I saw myself in the place, and I also started photographing my kind of connection with the place. So there were certain things that my mom, like I'd heard stories all my life, about Pakistan and about her friends, and the times it was just kind of like, okay, mom, like this, like isn't it was just always about her life there, never really anything here. So that's one of the things that I basically I had to take in when I got there, and it was a lot to take in. And I was very fortunate because the Midlands Arts Centre were very interested in this personal project, and then supported my visit twice to go to Pakistan and develop this project. And it was amazing for me because I think ultimately this project has led me on to think so much about my heritage, in the sense that it's almost expanded the dialogue. First it started off with what it means to be a Pakistani, and I wanted to represent that, but now actually there's something much more rich in that, because so right now there's South Asian Heritage Month going on, and it's basically to celebrate the history of South Asians in Britain, but also to understand and get a kind of educational system in place which basically educates people about the history of South Asia. So actually this ties in very kind of nicely with what I discovered when I was out there, because I realized actually as though, even though my family lived in Pakistan, prior to that, so my grandparents were actually born in Amritsar, which is in Punjab, which is in India. And then prior to them, like their parents were actually born in Srinagar, which is in Kashmir. So I think that kind of made me realize that South Asian history is so complex and it's so rich, and it's actually, there's probably so many people in Britain or in all over the world which actually probably don't realize that, because we kind of just have lived in the UK. We've never really been taught about it. Like I had to really search hard to find these little things out, because obviously my grandparents, they weren't in Britain. My parents are the only ones that are in Britain, and I've never met them. So my point is that it only takes really one generation to change something, and it takes one generation to forget something as well. And for me, I definitely think that my kind of nephews and like their children, they probably won't get this if they aren't taught it, or if they aren't they'd have to have some sort of family tree or some sort of thing passed down to them. And nothing is, like in my community, they don't really talk much about heritage and things like that. Like the importance of it isn't there yet. So I just kind of wanted to research this and get down to all of this and try and gather as much information as I could to try and understand the history of South Asia, but also where it came from my personal perspective. And I think it's so important to know this for cultural understanding, for other cultures. Like for me, I've grown up in such a diverse city, Birmingham, and I actually feel like Britain is so diverse, and it should be celebrated for that, and we should know about other people's communities, and where they come from and where they settled. And my mom, like she came at a time where there was racism apparent, but the way my mom is now, she doesn't ever feel like it's affected her. She's still very caring, and she doesn't feel bitter towards that. And I think that is because you have to kind of settle in, and you have to create a cultural understanding with your neighbors and wherever you go. And migration is happening everywhere. People are always moving around. And I think that's what's fascinated me as well, because migration was always there in my family, even though it's in South Asia, but people were always moving around. And I think to document that through photography, especially in Britain, is so pivotal.
Yeah. I mean, there's a question here, so that I'm going to dive into.
Oh, yeah.
This is from Nathan McGill. There's been loads of really
Hello,
positive
Nathan.
comments.
Yeah.
Loads of people have been really enjoying your talk, Maryam, as well. Loads of really nice comments flowing in.
Yeah. I'll pay them later. No, I'm just joking, everyone. probably don't know about doing something.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
But here's a question for you. So,
Okay.
thank you for doing what you do now. I'd love to know why you find your practice and work so relevant and necessary within society, which I guess you've sort of just touched upon, but is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yes,
Well, actually, sorry, you didn't touch upon it. You answered very thoroughly and clearly.
Yeah.
So that was a really good answer, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, one is cultural understanding, and actually, I think one that I can I've always related to, because I feel like I've had experiences where I feel like, you know, identity heritage. I have to say this for people who are interested in photographing about their, you know, personal experiences. It won't be everyone's cup of tea in the industry, sadly. And I as a young person, you know, as a 24-year-old who's kind of left university 2 years ago, I had no confidence or no kind of courage to talk about this in my work. I felt kind of hesitant. I was the only kind of British Pakistani Muslim woman in my class, and I always felt really hesitant and awkward talking about ethnicity, even though it was so big. Like it was such a big deal, you know, to me. Like, to have this culture, I thought, this is awesome. Like, you know, we have a community that's transformed in Britain. And, you know, like, because I couldn't help but compare like myself to my mom and maybe my grandmother and, you know, people like, you know, in the generations. And I thought, and I kind of always felt hesitant and reluctant. I always thought that people will still, you know, form their judgments through a Google search or through Twitter, you know, opinions or whatever. They won't want to listen to someone like me, because I'm sure they've got enough negative things to say about my culture. But actually, I realize, like, now 2 years on, I think lockdowns made me really think about this, how important it is to know about like to educate yourself about identity, representation and race. Especially like today the topic's hot, but actually it's been going on for years, and you know, we've had educators and researchers really delve deep into this matter. And it's so important within systems, you know, to keep that fairness in all kind of ethnical backgrounds and to represent to all those kind of communities. I didn't have that at university. I didn't have tutors that I could talk to about my work. And even now, when I, you know, have kind of dipped in to ask people their, you know, comments, most of the time, you know, I've had very supportive people who have advised me, but then I always find someone somewhere will have something a bit uninformed to say about race and representation, you know, and they will make comparisons to my work being similar to India or something. And it's like, so what I'm trying to get at is that's uninformed information to me, and that's a big thing for me, because actually the Pakistani community is very underrepresented in the arts, and especially women from the community. And it's always women's stories that don't get told, Laura, isn't it? It's always women's stories that don't get told in history. So for me, it strikes both ways, and it makes me more passionate to talk about these things, because it's uninformed information to me. Like, I can't actually continue with life without people not actually knowing what the truth is. And I realized as a person who is Muslim, who is British Asian, I should be doing this stuff. And likewise, probably so many other artists try and get at this with their work. And it's very important that we create that voice for ourselves. You know, that Muslim women create their own voice, South Asian women create their own voice, and not let anybody else create their own voice. So I think that's where I try and get out with my work. I think I went off on it.
That's just so well articulated.
Thank you.
And yeah, just it's really, as you said, it's just great. So I'm just going to keep asking questions.
Thank you.
Because these are really great answers. And kind of related to that, I suppose, what guidance would you, so obviously, as you just pointed out, over the past 2 years, you've grown in your confidence, you've received fantastic awards, you've gained recognition, you've got gained a network. And you know, just hearing you talk about your work, it's so evident that you're so motivated and passionate, and have such a clear intention with your work, which is wonderful. So what guidance would you have for graduate photographers, specifically those exploring gender and identity today?
I think definitely be well informed. So I think research is really important the first kind of few years you graduate. And I think especially young people have quite a lot of chances now. We have a lot of, you know, I always think, I mean, it's as in, I feel like when I kind of entered the photography world, there was a lot of, I'm not going to say old people, but people who were older older than me, a lot older than me, that had a very traditional way of thinking. And I also felt that there was a lot of people that were actually, they didn't really care about how old you were, which was very nice, because those were the opportunities that I ran after and I tried to use to basically, you know, develop myself. And I think it's so important to spend these 2 years to develop yourself. So I was very fortunate to be mentored by Nicola Shipley, and she was great. So she was somebody that actually really developed my career, and she is somebody that still developed my career. You know, I can still always kind of talk to her. And Grain is where she operates from. So Grain is a great place if you are from the Midlands to actually, you know, take on any opportunities for developing your practice. And I think especially for, you know, people who just graduate, they should use that opportunity to, you know, get mentored, develop their practice. But yeah, I think research education is really important in these 2 years. And then of course network with all the relevant people and have dialogue, conversation. I think it's so important to collaborate as well, as in, you know, you don't have to be, you know, best friends and working on projects, but it's so important to create a very friendly environment. And again, like I'm very lucky because a lot of young people, they are quite friendly, and they, you know, they want to connect and they want to help each other out, and that's really important. I think you know, and just today I had a young person from STA, basically it's like part of Photo Fusion. They are doing this project which is called FAM. So I just had a meeting with them, and they were really passionate about kind of creating a network for young artists, and even younger artists than me, so like, you know, 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds, and to feel that there's a safe place for them to actually continue the dialogue and, you know, progress their work. So I think things like that, the initiatives like that are very important, because you know, I didn't get that as a young art. Like when I was younger, I didn't feel like there was a safe space for me to talk about identity. I didn't even think that you could do that academically, and you could talk about race and all this stuff academically. It was really awful. So you know, I was only kind of taught about fashion and documentary photography at university. So obviously that's drastically different to you talking about your ethnic background. So yeah, I think it's very important to create networks basically of your own age, but then support people as well. Nothing's going to be taken away from anyone if you support each other and you actually help them develop. I've connected with so many artists in South Asia, and a lot of the times they aren't even given the opportunities that we're given, and just by me kind of shouting their work out online, they're like, this is lovely, you know, no one's ever done that for us. And I just think your work is great. Like just that simple thing can help, you know, an artist grow somewhere. We need artists, man. We are important people in society.
Very true, very true. Especially, yeah, I think hearing you talk today is a reminder of what can be achieved through photography. Yeah. What important messages are kind of getting out there, and histories and cultures that should be should be known and explored and wanted to be from a young age. So we're getting to about past, Maryam. We said we'd try and keep this short and sharp.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, or could you give us any details about when we could see this new body of work and where?
Well, everything's up in the air because of COVID, sadly, but hopefully we will have that, you know, kind of discussion soon. The Midlands Art Centre is closed till 2021, so hopefully when that kind of opens up, then I'll know a confirmed date when it will be released. I'm I mean, it's no harm to me because I've been developing the work mentally. I've had the format reviews, so I had some very useful advice through that. And in general, I think it's just it's really yeah, it's just, it all depends on so many things now because of COVID, but hopefully in good time.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very exciting to see. I've seen some of the work and it's amazing. So
I am releasing some of it online, like as in little bits, not much though, but I am releasing little bits and bobs of it. It's a very personal project. Like I said, I've represented myself in it, so you'll see some self-portraiture in it. And I brought that in because I specifically really kind of wanted, I just couldn't help but imagine my alternate life, what it could have been if we had stayed in Pakistan. So I brought all those kind of different things in, and yeah.
It's exciting.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, if you want to see some snippets of Maryam's work, her website is www.maryamwahid.com, and her Instagram handle is @MaryamWB. Oh, we've just had, actually just read this comment.
Oh, yeah.
This is, I don't know who this is, from Pasta Rules, a great name.
Yeah,
So
I love pasta.
Who doesn't? So it says, it is so wonderful to hear about and discover your work. I'm grateful for this discussion that is online so I can join and learn from half a world away. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And actually, thank you to everybody else. So many people have joined for this talk and put in lovely, kind emojis of love and support and friendliness.
Thank you.
So thank you to everybody. And as Maryam said, keep supporting other artists and work, and especially Maryam because she's so great. But with that, maybe we should draw to a close.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. You've done beautifully and so naturally, and I think it's because we've known each other for so long.
Oh yeah, soon. I'm looking forward to talking again soon. Looking forward to talking again soon.
Yeah,
hopefully in person.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Well, take care. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you.